Hi friends, welcome back to Speakok, your loving channel. Love. A strong feeling of affection. It changes our lives. These loves changed the world. Wars were fought, geniuses were inspired. Find out which passions burn the brightest, writing stories of tenderness and heartbreak that can never be forgotten. The stories of lovers who believed in each other and their love even if the whole world was against them still inspire and often make us sad. A closer investigation of the greatest love stories in history reveals that many of the most famous lovers met a tragic end. They did, however, show us that true love is stronger than anything else in the world. And it is the love that they had we are all hoping to find someday. Of course, with a happier ending. Romeo and Juliet. Probably the most famous love story of all was written by the celebrated English poet and playwright William Shakespeare sometime in the 1590s. Shakespeare's story of the tragic love between Romeo and Juliet is probably based on Arthur Brooks' poem The Tragical History of Romeo and Juliet that was published in the 1560s. The latter is believed to be an English translation of a novel of Italian writer Matteo Bandlo. But even his Romeo and Juliet are not original. The story reveals a major influence of ancient tragic love stories, most notably of the Roman story of Pyramus and Thisbe, whose families despise each other and prevent the lovers to be together. Just like Pyramus kills himself, falsely believing that Thisbe is dead, Romeo also commits suicide for mistakenly believing that Juliet is dead. Thisbe follows her lover in death upon discovering his dead body, which is exactly what Juliet does when she finds Romeo dead. Both Thisbe and Juliet stab themselves, but Romeo, unlike Pyramus who stabs himself with his sword, drinks the poison. Cleopatra and Mark Antony. The true love story of Antony and Cleopatra is one of the most memorable, intriguing and moving of all times. The story of these two historical characters had later been dramatized by William Shakespeare and is still staged all over the world. The relationship of Antony and Cleopatra is a true test of love. They fell in love at first sight. The relationship between these two powerful people put the country of Egypt in a powerful position. But their love affair outraged the Romans, who were wary of the growing powers of the Egyptians. Despite all the threats, Antony and Cleopatra got married. It is said that while fighting a battle against Romans, Antony got false news of Cleopatra's death. Shattered, he fell on his sword. When Cleopatra learned about Antony's death, she was shocked. And she took her own life. Great love demands great sacrifices. Lancelot and Guinevere. The story of Lancelot and Guinevere is a part of the Arthurian legend. It is thought to have been inspired or influenced by that of Tristan and Iseult. Just like the latter, Lancelot and Guinevere are adulterous lovers. Guinevere is married to King Arthur, who, just like King Mark, does not suspect anything at first. He eventually finds out about his wife being unfaithful to him with one of his most loyal knights. The Knights of the Round Table split into two groups, supporting either Arthur or Lancelot. After several fierce battles between the two men, Guinevere returns to King Arthur, but the destruction of the Round Table enables Mordred to challenge Arthur. The legendary king kills his rival, but he is mortally wounded. Guinevere, devastated for being responsible for the destruction of the Round Table and subsequent Arthur's downfall, enters a convent. Lancelot enters a hermitage and eventually becomes a priest. Both spend the rest of their lives in repentance. Dante and Beatrice. Rarely has a woman served as such profound inspiration for a writer, and yet he barely knew her. The Italian poet Dante Alighieri wrote passionately of Beatrice in the Divine Comedy and other poems, but only met the object of his affection twice. The first time, he was 9 years old and she was 8. The second time, they were adults, and while walking on the street in Florence, Beatrice, an emerald-eyed beauty, turned and greeted Dante before continuing on her way. Beatrice died at age 24 in 1290 without Dante ever seeing her again. Nonetheless, She was the glorious lady of my mind, he wrote, and she is my beatitude, the destroyer of all vices and the queen of virtue, salvation. Alexander I of Serbia and Draga Mason. The love between Alexander I of Serbia and Draga Mason appears to have been stronger than themselves. The relationship between the young king and 12 years older widow and lady-in-waiting to his mother caused an outrage in the country. But nothing could stop Alexander from marrying Draga and making her queen, not even his mother, who was banished from the country for opposing the marriage. Eventually, the opposition slightly subsided, but the situation worsened rapidly for the royal couple after the false pregnancy scandal. The latter seriously undermined the country's international reputation and infuriated a group of military officers who began to conspire against the royal couple. And when rumors appeared that one of the Queen's unpopular brothers will be proclaimed the heir to the throne, the conspirators decided to take action. In 1903, a group of military officers invaded the royal palace and assassinated the couple. Marie and Pierre Curie. This is a story about partners in love and science. Unable to continue her studies in Poland because universities did not admit women, Maria Sklodowska-Curie traveled to Paris in 1891 to attend the Sorbonne. Known by the French Marie, she spent every spare hour reading in the library or in the laboratory. The industrious student caught the eye of Pierre Curie, director of one of the laboratories where Marie worked. Curie ardently wooed Marie and made several marriage proposals. They were finally married in 1895 and began their famous partnership. In 1898 they discovered polonium and radium. The Curies and scientist Henri Becquerel won a Nobel Prize for Physics in 1903 for discovering radioactivity. When Curie died in 1904, Marie pledged to carry on their work. She took his place at the Sorbonne, becoming the school's first female teacher. In 1911 she became the first person to win a second Nobel Prize, this time for chemistry. She continued to experiment and lecture until her death of leukemia in 1934, driven by the memory of the man she loved. Layla and Majnun. A leading medieval poet of Iran, Nizami of Ganj is known especially for his romantic poem Layla and Majnun, inspired by an Arab legend. Layla and Majnun is a tragic tale about unattainable love. It had been told and retold for centuries, and depicted in manuscripts and other media such as ceramics for nearly as long as the poem has been penned. Layla and Case fall in love while at school. Their love is observed and they are soon prevented from seeing one another. In misery, Case banishes himself to the desert to live among and be consoled by animals. He neglects to eat and becomes emaciated. Due to his eccentric behavior, he becomes known as Majnun, madman. There he befriends an elderly Bedouin who promises to win him Layla's hand through warfare. Layla's tribe is defeated, but her father continues to refuse her marriage to Majnun because of his mad behavior, and she is married to another. After the death of Layla's husband, the old Bedouin facilitates a meeting between Layla and Majnun, but they are never fully reconciled in life. Upon death, they are buried side by side. The story is often interpreted as an allegory of the soul's yearning to be united with the divine. Paris and Helena. Recounted in Homer's Iliad, the story of Helen of Troy and the Trojan War is a Greek heroic legend, combining fact and fiction. Helen of Troy is considered one of the most beautiful women in all literature. She was married to Menelaus, king of Sparta. Paris, son of King Priam of Troy, fell in love with Helen and abducted her, taking her back to Troy. The Greeks assembled a great army, led by Menelaus's brother, Agamemnon, to retrieve Helen. Troy was destroyed. Helen returned safely to Sparta, where she lived happily with Menelaus for the rest of her life. Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal. Their names may largely be unfamiliar to most people in the West, but their love produced a monument that is famous all over the world, Taj Mahal. Shah Jahan and Mumtaz Mahal were a Mughal royal couple who shared a loving marriage until Mumtaz died while giving birth to their 14th child. Shah Jahan was devastated by his wife's death and plunged into deep grief that affected him both emotionally and physically. But his grief inspired him to build one of the world's greatest architectural masterpieces to serve as the final resting place of his beloved wife. Shortly after completing Taj Mahal, Shah got ill and was overthrown by his eldest son. He spent the rest of his life in house arrest and was buried next to his wife. The legend has it that he planned to build an exact copy of Taj Mahal in black marble on the opposite bank of the river Yamuna, but the works never started. Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler. Gone with the Wind can be identified as one of the immortal pieces of literary works in this world. Margaret Mitchell's famous work has chronicled the love and hate relationship between Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler. Proving that timing is everything, Scarlett O'Hara and Rhett Butler never seem to be quite in sync. Throughout the epic story, this tempestuous twosome experience passion but not permanence, and their stormy marriage reflects the surrounding Civil War battles. The flirtatious, promiscuous, and perpetually pursued Scarlett can't make up her mind between her many suitors. When she finally decides to settle on being happy with Rhett, her fickle nature has already driven him away. Hope springs eternal in our devious heroine, however, and the novel ends with Scarlett proclaiming, "Tomorrow is another day." Tristan and Iseult. Love story of Tristan and Iseult has been popularized in the 12th century France. It is thought to be inspired by an older Celtic legend. There are several versions of the story about the adulterous lovers, but they all more or less follow the same outline. Tristan and Iseult, who is supposed to marry Tristan's uncle King Mark, ingest a love potion and fell madly in love on their way to Cornwall. Iseult marries King Mark, but the love potion makes the lovers unable to resist each other. They pursue their affair until they are finally caught by Iseult's husband. They manage to escape death, but Iseult is forced to return to Mark. Tristan leaves Cornwall and marries another woman named Iseult. But when he is mortally wounded by a poison lance, he calls for his only true love. The story ends with Tristan dying of despair, convinced that Iseult does not want to come to him, while Iseult dies of grief after finding her lover dead. Selim and Anarkali. The love story of Selim and Anarkali is a story that every lover knows. The son of the great Mughal Emperor Akbar, Selim, fell in love with an ordinary but beautiful courtesan Anarkali. He was mesmerized by her beauty and fell in love as soon as he saw her. But the emperor could not digest the fact that his son was in love with an ordinary courtesan. He started pressurizing Anarkali and devised all sorts of tactics to make her fall in the eyes of the young, love-smitten prince. When Selim came to know of this, he declared a war against his own father. But the mighty emperor's gigantic army is too much for the young prince to handle. He gets defeated and is sentenced to death. This is when Anarkali intervenes and renounces her love to save her beloved from the jaws of death. She is entombed alive in a brick wall right in front of her lover's eyes. Thank you, listeners. I hope you also might be the greatest lover of your own dream world. Keep loving and have a great life. Thank you again.